Hi, you're listening to Delusional Optimism with Dr. B,
where we explore human resiliency
and learn how people thrive even after adversity.
We break down the complexities of the human brain so concepts are simple and relatable.
It's fun and empowering to understand how your earliest experiences
influence your relationships today.
What makes you tick?
Dr. B is a speaker, trainer, and consultant who understands emotions and human development from the inside out.
Let's dive into today's episode.
Here's Dr. B.
Welcome to our first episode of Season 2 of Delusional Optimism. I'm Seth Creekmore, and I'm here with Dr. B. Dr. B, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Seth?
Doing wonderful.
Great.
Really excited. Actually, the countdown has begun. I'm headed to Europe in September, so I'm so excited. But then, like the laundry list of things that I have to get done before I leave just starts piling on. And remember all the things that you need to buy and you need to figure out before you leave. It's exciting, but very anxiety ridden.
Oh my goodness. Well, you're going to have such a great time. Where are you going?
So I have a wedding in Switzerland that I'm attending. I know.
Fun.
So rough.
Yeah, rough life.
And then because all of my work is remote, I'm just going to stick around there for a while. And then, I don't know, we'll see. The options on the table right now are France, England, Portugal, maybe Denmark. I have some family in Denmark. So, yeah,
goodness.
I'll probably be staying for a couple months. We'll see. So some of these episodes will be from an undisclosed location in Europe.
Wow. Okay. We'll disclose it though when we're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Sure. I'll give an update for everyone.
Okay. I'm going to put one vote in for Nazaré, Portugal. Nazaré.
Okay.
The 100-foot wave. It's the biggest wave in the world.
And have you seen that documentary yet?
Yes.
Okay. I just heard about it, and it's on my list to watch before I go.
Oh yeah,
so.
I've known about lifelong surfer, so I've known about Nazaré for a long time, and then they just did that documentary on that wave, and I'm just mesmerized at there's a building up on the peak, a lighthouse that was built in the 1500s that overlooks this wave that comes in, and it actually, the big giant swells start coming in October and November. Wow. And that's when they're doing just spectators can watch. I just want to go stand in that, just like insanely, in the
that's going to be on my list.
Nature and the universe of just power. And then people are surfing it. I can't, I just don't even, I do understand the psychology of that. Would never.
A death wish is the psychology term for that.
There is, yes. There is. Yes, there's a part of the brain that actually doesn't activate on the same level as somebody who has a normal fear response. And I say normal very loosely, but there are people who are in very, very dangerous hobbies or professions. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons is because their brain doesn't respond to fear.
Is this like Alex Honnold from Free Solo?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yes, exactly like that. So
do you think that was like he was always been like that, or he's just kind of trained his brain to be that way? I think
that he's always been like that. I think that part of his brain did not develop and express. So there's a neurobiological difference there. It's not necessarily bad or good. We don't need to put judgment on it. However, it absolutely puts him at a risk of injury and death compared to somebody like me who would never, ever do that.
Right.
So
there's probably evolutionary advantages and disadvantages of that, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And if you think about his story, but other stories of climbers, free solo climbers in particular, or 100-foot wave surfers, I mean, I'm sure that this exists in lots of sports and activities, but oftentimes they push the limits of their activity to the point of death. Think about people who climb Mount Everest.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're climbing into oxygen depleted, freezing cold. I mean, there's just, and your brain says, I can beat the odds. You're a true delusional optimist.
Wow. That seems, I mean, to get into our topic here, that it does seem like recently, like not crazy recently, but that the desire for risky activity has been increasing. One theory for me, not necessarily in the risk category, but like the more like the Tough Mudders and the Spartan races and all that other stuff, is like we've become too comfortable, so our body ends up desiring discomfort. And so we pay to be uncomfortable.
And scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we don't get to experience that on a day-to-day basis. I don't know. What's your theory on that? Do you feel like that's accurate, or?
I love that. I think that is so accurate. And I think that we evolutionarily haven't, once we were hunter and gatherers, we have an innate evolutionary fear of spiders because at one point in our history, spiders could literally kill us.
Right.
And we didn't have protection from them. We didn't have the pest control company. We didn't have, housing, all of these things that we do now. And so one of the things that happens is our brain is still, we haven't had time to evolutionarily remove that fear from our system.
Interesting.
But so we just have this fear of spiders and we don't know why, right? Like if you think about it, if you ask people, I just had this experience. Someone's like, yeah, just take one of those sticks and be sure to wipe the spider webs down in the maze you're going to walk through. And I'm like, I'm not walking through that maze. If there's spiders, I am not going there. I'm too scared. And
interesting.
And I have these facts. I know why I'm scared, and I didn't want to walk through the spider maze. So I think you're absolutely right. And then I think it's on steroids. That sense is on, we're experiencing that with COVID-19 and the pandemic, and really being forced to hibernate in a lot of weird ways, that people are connecting with their need for experiences differently. And they're willing, what's so interesting to me is what people are willing to pay for in order to create that neuro push for excitement, when they could actually do things they could find ways to get that and do that themselves in a natural, healthy way. So, but think about it. We've been doing this forever. Let's go skydiving.
Yeah.
Right? It's not free. Yeah. It's not easy.
No.
And that's way outside the free solo zone. I mean, the free solo zone and the climbing Mount Everest, those things are that's in a different level of need for neuroactivation. Does that make sense? Like the brain
survival
requires so much more to activate in order to feel like something's happening, that they have to go to an extreme. And that's actually probably a dysfunction of the brain, because it's not serving the survival need as protectively as it needs to let you climb the face of a mountain with no protective gear. Your brain being in survival is a little bit.
But what a level of elation. Like, I felt elation as he crested the top. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So our second topic here is science and spirituality in the 4 generations, how they possibly perceive it. We don't represent everyone, but just a guess along those lines.
For sure. Let's just start with that and remember that this season 2 is all about generational differences. But one of the things that's so important to remember is this isn't a representation of all the individuals in a generation. It's the representation of a generation as a whole. And so it's an overarching way of thinking, not everybody's individual way of thinking. So we have to keep that in perspective, because people will find themselves differing from their generation, and that's perfectly reasonable and makes sense. But in general, life experiences based on science do lead to how a very large group of people view the world, and that impacts the policies that they make, the laws they make, the way they parent and do all sorts of things. So in terms of spirituality or even religion, the younger generations actually, what we're learning are less quote unquote religious and more spiritual, but they often are, they really lean into science. So why would that be that, older generations lean into religion or spirituality and younger generations lean into science? Well, first of all, technology and innovation and accessibility to information.
Right. Yeah. And what I've noticed coming from a religious background, here's how I've kind of parsed the difference. And maybe this isn't completely accurate, but there's spirituality, and then organized spirituality becomes religion.
Okay.
And at least that's how I feel like my generation would probably define that. And I think the millennial generation, we grew up in a hyper-religious setting where there were very established groups. And there's good things about religion, don't get me wrong.
Right.
Obviously, there's good and bad things about everything. But I think the consistent congruence and the commonality of a shared belief is something that's really strong and really helpful to moving something forward, whether you're moving something forward that's helpful or not helpful. And then I think millennials in a lot of ways became disillusioned because we saw the fruits of that religion not quite matching up with what the religion was saying. And so we're like, I don't think I want to be a part of this. And so there's an exit, and not necessarily an exit from beliefs, or some was exit from beliefs, but there's an exit into more individualism, and that's where like backing off into just individual spirituality of like, well, I can't find the truth in this organization, so I have to find the truth within myself, which is great. Don't get me wrong, it's really great. But when you don't allow your ideas that you come up with to be critiqued by others and by a larger body that has had history upon history of good kinds of arguing over ideas and philosophies and stuff like that, then we all kind of have our separate spirituality, and there's not a movement towards a singular thing, which again, not a good or bad thing, but it's just there's like strengths and weaknesses for both. I think what's great about it is my generation came back, questioned, critiqued, and we're really great at that. What we're not great at is rebuilding after we've questioned and critiqued. And either we continue to just like critique, or we get sucked to one side or the other extreme because we miss the stability of having a shared system of belief. So we get drawn into hyper left liberalism or socialism or something like that, and anything else other than that is complete and utter evil, or you get super conservative and fundamental and same idea. And so I think that lack of stability makes you drawn to the ultimate extremes instead of finding some sort of middle path to keep moving, of critiquing and building at the same time.
I think I love listening to you describe the way you think about just this entire concept. And as I was listening to you, I was running it through my sort of generational and clinical psychology brain and thinking, one of the things that your generation hasn't done yet is gotten to the end of the story or gotten to a later part of the story, because you guys, you're still in the muck. You're young.
Very much.
Very much. And so what happens is, where my generation that's older, I think that I can see so much optimism and growth potential and some of the real positives that are going to come from millennials and from Gen Z, the next up and coming 2 generations. But you're still in the middle of it and I know the accessibility to information has just exploded with millennials. And really with Gen X, we've had the ability to have access to lots of information, even baby boomers. I mean, we're these 4 generations, I think we talked about it before, but I'll do a little recap. Generations are about a 20-year period, and there are 4 archetypes in generational theory, and generational cycles run about the lifespan, so 80 years, and then they repeat. So the archetypes repeat. So baby boomers are considered the archetype prophet. Gen X is the archetype nomads. Millennials, the archetype heroes. Gen Z is the archetype artists. And so what we didn't talk about is the silent generation were also artists. So now we're repeating. And then Gen Alpha, which will be the next generation, the kids born after 2011, will be prophets again, like baby boomers. Now, they've had an entire life, 80-year, 100-year cycle of new information, but their big, broad, depth way of being idealistic, being crusaders. That's sort of the archetype of prophets, baby boomers.
Yeah.
Will be followed up with all this new information, but their little counterparts, Gen Alpha. And so they're going to bring some of that back in a different way. So where boomers really needed to anchor into, in a lot of ways, religion and the organization, like you were talking about, very much the structure of understanding spirituality, then Gen X became somewhat disillusioned. We're a small generation. We raised ourselves. We didn't have our parents. We were latchkey kids. Then we raised millennials and Gen Z, homelanders. And science in and of itself, it has nothing to do with the generation as much as it does with the production of innovation. We're able to understand things more, and we have the internet. So you have the blessing and curse of being born at a time when you have accessibility to information and science. We also look at the brain now. We don't have to guess what's going on in someone's brain.
Yeah.
We can literally see what's happening inside the body in ways that we never could have done 100 years ago.
The other thing that kind of trips me out is I was alive at the birth of the internet. Like I remember pre-internet and I remember internet.
Yes.
And the watching that revolution, like how fast it's happened is just
right.
insane.
Oh, it's
honestly.
And then your counterpart, your next generation, the generation after you, those homelanders, they're also called digital natives. They were literally born without ever having the experience of not having the internet.
Yeah.
So it's appendage like for them. I walked past the bathroom that my son, who's in his 20s, uses, and he was literally brushing his teeth and texting at the same time. Which could make a lot of parents crazy, right? You could say, like, put your phone down. But in reality, what do I care? Like, he's brushing his teeth. That's, I want him to brush his teeth. And if he wants to text and he's capable of doing that level of multitasking, then go for it. So one of the things that's so important is, and I hope that this podcast does for everybody, is open our minds to not, why we think the way we think. It is understandable. We can categorize a lot of things scientifically and come up with conclusions that make sense so we don't have to invent them anymore.
Right. I've also noticed that and heard some things about Gen Z being more comfortable with religion and that sort of thing, and comfortable with science, and just being like, these things can go. It's not a battle anymore for them because it's just like, well, duh.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
This is how it is, and this is what I want to believe, and it's not a big deal. It's not a big, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen? So I think that's been really interesting to observe in people that I know that are Gen Z.
I think that that's very common. Remember, Gen Z is the archetype artists, like their grandparents who are the silent generation. So World War II was their big life event that defined their generation's thinking. And then Homelanders, it was an on U.S. soil terrorist attack that defined them. So they have these shared...
Interesting.
We have to work together in order to make good things happen. So in a lot of ways, Gen Z has to make religion and science work together.
Yeah.
And they've had enough flexibility in their learning with technology and really safety in a lot of ways. And protectiveness from their parents, that they are able to hold two things at the same time. They don't feel as compelled to decide. Where I think millennials are much more intense about deciding which one. Gen X is just, all we care about is protecting the young. because we were latchkey kids, and that had such a strong influence on not having adults to turn to. Even though those adults believed that they were taking care of us by taking care of our financial and, housing needs, so they worked to do that.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is we spend a lot of time thinking ourselves and making these plans, and then we raise children who were very, very protected, and then hyper protected in Gen Z. So they had a lot of safe time in some ways to think for themselves, but they also feel overprotected.
And our third topic is a bit of a fun one, and something that's close, near and dear to my heart, is travel. So, and the difference and what it means to travel, why we travel in the different generations. So, Dr. B, why don't you go ahead and start and talk about your section of the generational train?
Okay, so my section of the generational train is that And this is so interesting because of how we compare travel, vacation, and work. And so my generation is very comfortable with, like, we love work-life balance. You know, I work, and I'm invested in all my work. And then I reward myself by taking a vacation and I leave work behind, in theory. You know, that's my dream. Where I think, well, one of the things we know, and you said it earlier in a conversation, whether it was recorded or not. Yeah, I'm going to be on vacation and I work remotely, so I'm just going to, go to Switzerland. So there's actually a term that millennials have coined called leisure time. And it's the combination of work and leisure. Like they're the same thing. You work and have leisure time all at the same time.
Exactly.
It's not a thing.
Wonderful.
And this is where the battle in the workforce happens between baby boomers and millennials, because baby boomers believe work hard, get ahead. That's how you become successful. And they have a very difficult time with vacationing the way a millennial would vacation. Put your phone down. You're like, I can't put my phone down. I'm working and I'm at the beach.
Yeah. I mean, and there's good things to take from
all
work-life balance for sure. Because I know the constant leisure is not healthy, and being able to have delineation is very important. But yeah, like going to Switzerland, I'm going to be setting certain times a time, delineating like what is leisure and what is leisure, and making sure that there is time where I'm not working. But I think how I think my generation views travel is, well, one, I think it's the accessibility and the popularity of travel became more than just like you go to some beach and do something. It's like, no, we go, and it's the experience thing. It's not so much the status of it as much as, there's some status to it, but not the like baby boomer Gen X level of I have a massive home and I go to the Cayman Islands for vacation every year. Yeah. It's like, that's not interesting. We want to go and have major experiences in crazy places and have stories to tell and all of that. And I think that's kind of what has led to the critique of a lot of systems and organizations, is because we have the experience of other cultures, whether firsthand or secondhand. Yeah. And like, so the US isn't the absolute pinnacle of being a country. Yeah. Like there are other ways to do this, and maybe we can improve a little bit. And so I think there's that. There's the, just whenever you travel, you get a broader sense of like, I'm not on this rock alone. Like we get so sequestered in our country, especially as large as the US is. Like so many of my friends here in northern Indiana some of them have not even been out of the state. Yeah. And it's like, how do you, and definitely not even out of the country. And they don't understand different people's perspectives because of that. So it's really interesting.
And from a neurobiological perspective, one of the things that we know is that having diverse experiences with different people, different places, different foods, different cultures, that then creates the framework, the blueprints in our brains that allow us to embrace diversity and then integrate it into our systems of how we do things as a quote unquote either country or society or community. And with millennials, because of air travel and affordability, you can go anywhere in the world anytime, and you don't and you have access to safety at home. Does that make sense? Where travel for me has been, I've traveled a lot in my life, but I've always kept in my mind the safety. One, affordability. It hasn't always been affordable. I didn't travel out of the country until I was an adult. And two, the safety understanding. Like, we didn't have the internet. So how would you know how to go to Thailand? How would you know how to do that and do it safely and in a way? And then add baby boomers, and really that's, a whole other level of, if you're going to go somewhere, you're going to go to your big house in the Cayman Islands because that's familiar. Right. I think the other part of it is that I think about this a lot when I travel, is I just want to get there and chill out and relax. I don't care where I am. I do want to learn things, but if I'm going on, like I went to Kenya a couple years ago, and I went there with a very personal agenda about learning things about my experience and the people that I was meeting and all of that. I went there with an agenda. It wasn't to relax. So I almost went exploring the world to work. But then when I go on vacation, I want to land, and I'll do a little bit of this and that fun stuff. Sure. But in my fantasy is that I'm just going to relax and do all the things that I don't do at home when I'm working, like sleep and eat and just kick back and do kind of the relaxing, the self-care stuff. Yeah. But millennials mix it up. Oh, yeah. You can do all the work, you can do all the cultural connecting, but then you can have a really leisurely hike couple of days, all on the same trip, which Gen X now watch. Like, I watch millennials and I think, wow, that's super cool. I want to, that's great. And then I want to take credit for teaching you and making that accessible for you. You're welcome.
Fine. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm curious, last thing on this subject, I'm curious what your thoughts are with Gen Z and their relation to travel, because I don't remember if we've talked about this or not, but their obsession with kind of fame and being rich, being an Instagram star, TikTok star, YouTube star, something like that. Yeah. Is it the romanticism of the music in the background as you slowly pan through the mountainside,
right?
Or is it the actual experience of the thing?
Well, so that is such an awesome question, but I think that there's some of that branding that happens with millennials and Gen Z.
Absolutely.
It's a similar thing, and that's because of the introduction of social media into our world. And we're still unraveling that. Millennials and Gen Z are still unraveling that. There's a lot of millennials now who started off there and have matured into, wow, now we see the downsides of that. And you're seeing the downsides of that in the next up and coming generation because they're right next to you. But the other thing is, with COVID-19 and this full cycle of the 80-year cycle, we're in the transition period of a closing of 80 years and a restart. So that's why we feel all this tumultuousness, the 100-year pandemic, that actually Gen Z have, you've heard the saying FOMO, fear of missing out. There's a new word called, I forget, but it's something like FOMO, but it's the fear of leaving home. It's the fear of going anywhere. So it is the actual, in a lot of ways, it's the opposite. And they've kind of become that homebody generation in some ways. If I can't videotape and safely do a hike with you and make it look like a lovely panoramic event, I would just as soon stay home and watch it on TV or on the internet or YouTube, or have the experience in a less natural way. Yeah. And that's going to be, it's all emerging and developing because this stuff continually cycles and each generation impacts the next generation. So with a close sort of on my side is that what I want people to think about in terms of generations are that we're always maturing and gaining perspective about ourselves as well as our children and our parents or grandparents. So even though we're moving down the track, so's everybody else. And I just had a conversation with my millennial son-in-law, and I think about this about my millennial kids, that all of a sudden I'm sort of at this new point in our relationship where, oh yeah, you know what? They're pretty much really good and in charge of their lives, you know? And I'm at a different point where I'm not over the hill, but I'm reaching the hill.
Cresting.
I'm cresting. And so I think, oh yeah, I can lean into them and relax a little bit about the parenting role, because we've all matured to a different level. They're not 12 anymore. They're not even 20 anymore. Now they're almost 30, or they are over 30. So we have to continually keep up in our own brains and minds about where we are in life and where the people in the generations are around us in life. Because millennials are going to take over and fix a whole bunch of problems we have because of their perspective and their experience with the global environment. And we can just almost chill out and let that happen.
Yeah. Awesome.
So
it's been a fascinating conversation. Can't wait to hear more things to come in talking to different people in this next season. We would love to hear your thoughts on what generation you're from, and perhaps your thoughts on the three topics that we mentioned today. So feel free to share things, and you can send an email or through Instagram to either one of us. You have contact@drbconnections.com, and then Instagram. What is your Instagram again? Speaking of generational differences. I know a lot of people by their Instagram name, and I don't know their name.
I think it's Dr. Beasley. I just don't know how to spell it. I think it's dr.beasley.
Let me look this up real quick. Okay, your Instagram handle is Dr.Beasley.
Wow.
And then
I was right.
So yeah, go ahead and give Dr. B a follow and connect with her on anything, any questions, whatever. And then I am at Creekmore Music on Instagram. So pleasure, and we'll talk to you later.
Always leave a live print. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. If you're interested in booking a training, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at my website, Dr. B Connections. There's a big button that says, book a training with Dr. B. It's that easy. If this show has been beneficial for you, please share it with your friends and family. Spreading the word about the show helps us grow our audience and helps continue to change the world together. Again, thanks so much for listening to Delusional Optimism. Now, go leave a life print. All content on Delusional Optimism is for informational and educational purposes only, and does not constitute medical advice and does not establish any kind of patient-client relationship. A patient-client relationship is only formed through a written contractual agreement. If you need medical or mental health care advice, you should consult your doctor or therapist or go to your nearest hospital.